Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Sweet. Got it. Got it. Got. All right. I think we are live on all the platforms. I think maybe not. What's going on, you beautiful people? I hope everybody's having a wonderful Wednesday. Yes, it's Wednesday. It's hump day today. Holy crepes. I'm a bit out of it. Dun, dun, dun. But today we are dishing on how these weight loss medications all actually work. So, I mean, that's kind of super exciting and all the things that are in between that. So I am looking forward to it. Good night to you, sweet Shelley. I mean, I wish I was going to bed now, but we got at least an hour of talking here. So Life with Liz. What's going on, Liz? So welcome back to another week, you beautiful people. We are talking, well, we've got Saxenda, we've got Ozempic. These are the two that I have here. And then Contrave. Contrave is the other one that I have. Obviously, there's other weight loss medications on the market, but I'll kind of cover these two just because they're kind of the more popular ones in some respects, if you will. So when it comes to the weight loss medications, we'll start with the GLP-1 receptor agonists. Now, these guys are basically, there's a whole pile of them in this class. Saxenda is currently the only one in Canada that is available for weight loss, weight management. We do have Ozempic here in Canada, and we are waiting for Wegovy to come to market at some point in time. Whenever that's going to happen, it's a great question. Nonetheless, all of these drugs fall under a class of medications called the GLP-1 receptor agonists, or the glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonist. So GLP-1 is basically a hormone that's naturally produced by our body. And what essentially is happening when that hormone is getting produced is it gets released from what's called the L cells of our intestine. So they're just a random set of cells in the intestine when food essentially hits our stomach. And then GLP-1 floats out and does a couple of things. First things first, it goes to the pancreas, which produces insulin and glucagon. It helps to, increase the levels of insulin. Insulin then brings our blood sugar levels down. Glucagon, on the other hand, brings our blood sugar levels up. And so what the GLP-1 hormone and these medications do is they reduce the amount of glucagon that's being produced, and ultimately that reduces the amount of glucose that is being produced and put out into the body. So that has a kind of a compounding effect of helping to reduce our overall blood sugars. Now, they do also help with things like insulin resistance, so kind of sensitizing certain tissues, whether it's at the liver, the muscle tissues, that sort of thing, basically increasing the number of receptors that our cells have in order to take up more sugar from the bloodstream. And again, all of it brings the blood sugar levels down. The next thing that it does that kind of has a bit of effect from the weight management perspective and the blood sugar perspective is that these drugs and the GLP-1 hormone basically slow down how quickly food goes from the from the stomach to the small intestine. So it's sometimes referred to as gastric emptying, slows that whole process down. And what essentially happens in that case is that food sits in your stomach for longer. So it gives us kind of that idea that we get that satiety signaling, food's being digested, slowed down, all that wonderful stuff. But also if food is being slowed down in the transit process, well, less of it is going to get absorbed and taken up into the bloodstream, or less quickly it's going to get taken up into the bloodstream. So we shouldn't necessarily get that same excursion that can kind of happen if it were to all be rapidly absorbed and taken up. Now, a lot of people will note that when they start on these medications, they tend to get nausea. Rare instances, they might get vomiting and heartburn and just kind of general unwell feeling. A lot of that is due to the slowing down of food going from your stomach to your small intestine. However, there is also a mechanism, we believe, somewhere in the brain that these drugs are acting at that are ultimately having a role in terms of causing a bit of the nausea component of things. And that's why people might experience nausea when their stomach is empty, they haven't eaten anything, and that sort of thing. Now, this is technically a side effect, and it will go away after time. So what will ultimately happen is that the medication, your body just gets used to it, speeds up the gastric emptying again. And so you no longer have this nausea or large satiety type feeling within the stomach, or because of the food just kind of sitting in your stomach. So that's not the main way that it helps us to manage our weight. It has a small role, at least initially, but over the long term, how these drugs help us manage our weight is essentially it acts in the brain. In particular, there's a little spot in our brain called the hypothalamus. It's kind of like you can almost think of it like a thermostat. A lot of people refer to it as that, and that it kind of regulates your body. It keeps everything in balance, whether it's your temperature, your blood pressure, all those beautiful things. It's constantly monitoring it and managing those things. But it also manages our appetite and how much our body is burning and that sort of thing. So in that respect of things, what the GLP-1 hormone does is it reduces your appetite. So reducing, feelings of hunger and wanting of food. It also reduces your liking of food. So, you might have the cookie on the table, for example, but it wasn't nearly as good as what you were expecting. And so, yeah, you're less likely to go and eat it again if you did eat it at all. So that's kind of some of the aspects that happen and occur in that realm of it. And that's primarily how it helps to manage our weight into the long term, is by reducing our appetite, that drive for food, so that overall we're eating and consuming smaller portions. We're just wanting less food, smaller portions. If you get into a calorie deficit, you're ultimately going to lose weight. So that's Ozempic, that's Saxenda, Trulicity. What are the other guys out there? Mounjaro is slightly different. It has an extra component that makes it a bit more potent, but essentially acts kind of along the same mechanisms and stuff like that. So that's the GLP-1 receptor agonists. I've got like a whole pile of questions coming in. So let me answer a couple on that before we jump over to Contrave. All right, so kind of a random question, but Dan Marie, do probiotics with digestive enzymes work for weight control? No, they would not. Wegovy here in Canada yet, not quite yet. It's approved and everything like that. Hopefully sometime in the very, very near future. Kathy, so do these drugs still have the same effects after weight loss surgery? Yeah, I mean, even though you've had the weight loss surgery, I mean, depending on the surgery that you've had, whether it's a gastric sleeve, Roux-en-Y, there's a couple other new techniques that are coming out there and stuff like that. But yeah, these drugs do work, still provide benefit to these individuals and helping to manage their weight and reducing their appetite, because again, a lot of it is acting within the brain, right? That's kind of where our main appetite regulator is. So it can work in conjunction with those surgeries, whether you have, say, stalled out in your weight loss journey or started to regain weight or what have you. These drugs might be beneficial in that regard, but of course, follow up with your doctor. Sean Oliver, any eye problems with the drugs? So in general, the big thing that a lot of people are worried about is a condition called diabetic retinopathy. And what is happening in that situation is basically individuals who have diabetes are at an increased risk of developing eye issues and problems and stuff like that, ultimately affecting their vision. Obviously, a very serious and concerning problem. And initial studies did show that maybe there was a linkage to the GLP-1 receptor agonists and this retinopathy, or the development of it. But what was actually found is that because the GLP-1 receptor agonists are so effective at bringing your blood sugars down so rapidly, what actually is causing the retinopathy, and we see it with people who suddenly go on insulin therapy and we rapidly bring their blood sugars down, is that it's actually the decrease in your blood sugar levels that drives the retinopathy. And most people have some kind of retinopathy prior to going on treatment and stuff like that. They then get a rapid drop in blood sugars, whether it's with a GLP-1 receptor agonist or insulin or another medication. And that ultimately, that large drop causes the retinopathy. Now, could be all kinds of reasons as to why exactly that's the case. Obviously, sugar, having your sugar levels drop, there is a big osmolarity type changes and stuff like that. That can certainly cause some issues and problems. And so, yeah, definitely there could be some contributing factors in that respect of things. But in general, just taking these drugs, really no issues or concerns from the eyesight perspective. So, yeah. Jess L, is it true you can get Wegovy Ozempic cheaper at a compounding pharmacy in Canada? If so, how does it work? So as far as I know, you can't get Ozempic or Wegovy from a compounding pharmacy in Canada. Yeah, in the States, I know there is those compounding pharmacies and somewhat sketchy clinics that are prescribing it. The problem is that it's not exactly Ozempic or Wegovy that's being prescribed. Often it's kind of like a research grade chemical that is similar to the molecule, but it's usually a different salt that's ultimately being used in these injections that are being provided via compounding pharmacies and stuff like that. I don't recommend it because we don't exactly know the kinetics. It's a slightly different salt. So we don't know what that means in terms of receptor binding, how it clears the body, all of those sorts of things. Further, it's research grade chemicals. So it doesn't undergo the same stringent review that FDA approved manufacturing plants would undergo and get and stuff like that. If it's research grade, it's meant to be used for research. So being used in mice, that sort of thing, and not in humans. So really, I would personally avoid it. As well, in the States, they often mix it with other compounds like vitamin B6, B12, whatever. And again, we don't know the kinetics and how all of that works and stuff like that. And so how much it affects the drug, if it potentially causes some other issues and problems, and that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely not recommended on my front of things. I mean, your body, your risk, fly right at her, but I'm definitely not attaching or associating my name to it, and none of the credible clinicians I know are either. So yeah, I would do your best to stay clear personally. How do you deal with the sulfur burps? So the sulfur burps are mostly due to a aspect of, well, again, that gastric emptying thing. So couple of things there. Eating smaller, more frequent meals throughout the day can help with the sulfur burps and reducing kind of that reflux capacity that's going on. As well, you would want to be looking at kind of antacid treatments. I'm a big fan of Gaviscon personally, but Tums, you could look at things like Pepcid, Zantac, that sort of thing. Or if you were to go to your doctor and your doctor would assess that it's severe enough, you might even be able to get, like, say, a PPI like Nexium, pantoprazole, that sort of thing. Those could certainly help with the sulfur burps, but again, they should resolve over time. The other things to look at would be reducing alcohol, caffeine, any spicy foods or trigger foods for you that may have caused heartburn in the past. As well, not eating within, give yourself at least a half an hour. I generally recommend an hour before you go to bed, and don't lie flat, kind of elevate yourself in the bed so that you don't get that reflux thing that's kind of going on there. So Maggie, Rose, Joss, Soraya, I lost my sense of smell on Saxenda. You would be the first that I've heard of that. Interesting. Sherry, I've lost 58 pounds on Ozempic, but nothing in 4 months at 1. So take a diet break, relax, chill out, take some time off, calculate what your predicted calorie intake should be, bring your calories up to that, chill there for a few months, focus on weightlifting, developing other healthy habits, and then, look at potentially creating a calorie deficit from there. Mr. Picklefoot, question, I have been on Saxenda since December. So far, I've lost 13 pounds. Should I continue on Saxenda, or does it lose potency over time? So you've been on Saxenda since December. So let's say full month of December, January, February, March. We're halfway through March, and you've lost 13 pounds. So, you're right around 12 to 13 weeks. I mean, it sounds like you're doing quite fantastic. I don't know why you would think it's losing its potency at this point or what have you, but generally the drugs, well, in fact, the drugs don't lose their potency. We have lots of good data to show that they continue working. And in fact, when you come off of them, people tend to gain the weight back. So it's not that the drugs lose potency or anything like that. Your current progress is fantastic and great. I usually recommend anywhere from a pound to half a pound each week is a great weight loss progress and stuff like that. And so it's a matter of just staying continuous with it and potentially looking at things like taking a diet break, getting more exercise activity, weightlifting, building muscle, all those beautiful and wonderful things. And yeah, so that would be kind of what I would look at there. When are they going to be available in Canada as weight management drugs? So Saxenda already available here in Canada. It's the only one that's currently available. Wegovy is technically approved here in Canada as well. It's just not on pharmacy shelves. That should be changing in a couple of months or so. Mounjaro has also been approved for diabetes here in Canada. I haven't checked the Health Canada website in a while, but it should be getting the approval for obesity in the next couple of months. Again, supply chain issues and stuff. So it's not available even for diabetes at this point in time, but it should be hitting the shelves pretty soon. Guy Miron, is Ozempic as bad as Saxenda for sulfuric burps? I would honestly say Ozempic tends to be worse than Saxenda. And the reason being is that Ozempic is just that much more potent. It's much more effective in terms of weight loss and everything else that it does, from blood sugars, weight loss, all the benefits that come with it. But that's because it's more potent. And so greater potency means that per dose, per milligram that you're getting, you're going to get more effect in terms of reducing things like the gastric emptying and leading to some of the side effects that can potentially happen. Saxenda, I found it's hit and miss. I would say 50% of people develop side effects. The other 50 were fine, didn't really even notice they were taking it other than the appetite reducing effects. Just about every single person that I have started on Ozempic at any point in time has gotten some side effect of some kind. I think maybe one or two people who just were like, yeah, don't even realize I'm taking a drug, and noticed absolutely nothing. So yeah, that's kind of something to think about in that respect. But yeah, take it slow, slowly increase, and that should help mitigate some of the side effects. For stacks, I find I'm binging more at night. Should I move my injection time? If you're finding you're binging at nighttime, likely the biggest culprit is that you're not eating enough food early enough in the day. So when you're tired and wore out and have less ability to restrain yourself and stuff like that, via your cognitive capacity, basically your body is making up for the fact that you haven't eaten enough food earlier in the day. So that's one of the number one things that I always correct first, is making sure that people are consuming a larger amount of calories and in particular protein earlier in the day. And that essentially will resolve that binging at night for a majority of people. So hopefully that helps. Caleb on YouTube, what are your thoughts about Americans buying GLP-1 meds from Canada? Does it create problems for Canadians? Yeah, I mean, certainly there's kind of an ongoing raging debate about Americans buying Canadian drugs and that sort of thing. There are like online pharmacies. I know nothing about them, and the ones that I knew of way back in the day were all shut down because of regulatory changes and stuff like that. And a lot of people made a lot of freaking money doing it. But yeah, the reason being is that because generally what happens, I think it happens on a provincial level right now, but I live in Alberta, for example. So what Alberta government essentially goes and does is they go and negotiate with X drug companies. So we'll say Novo Nordisk, and say like, we want to buy this amount of Saxenda or have this amount allocated to us and stuff like that at a certain price point, blah, blah, blah. They negotiate it. It kind of goes through all the various wholesalers and whatnot like that. And ultimately, drug is brought into the country and we get this kind of set allotment. So if a large amount of these drugs are now being used by Americans, that's going to affect the supply for the Canadian population, and it's going to cause this whole over cluster F, if you will. And so, yeah, it's definitely not the greatest, and certainly can affect, the Canadian supply of medications and stuff like that. So, yeah, I can understand why the Americans are coming to Canada, but that's a, whole other slew of issues and stuff. So Sherry, at the 1.25 milligram dose, do you think I can still lose? I mean, you'll lose if you are in a calorie deficit. That's the foundational principle of it. If you're not in a calorie deficit, the weight loss ultimately will not occur. Cat.2, any advice to get these covered by Alberta drug plans? So, that's a good question. Ozempic, if you have diabetes, pretty easy for the most part to get it covered. You generally have to be on metformin and then go on to like a sulfonylurea, like, what is it called? Glycoside or glyburide. So you generally need to go on a drug like that, and then you can qualify for Ozempic. So that's pretty easy from that perspective, especially with say like Alberta Blue Cross and stuff. No problems, no issues there. Saxenda, on the other hand, hasn't been a lot of uptake. I think because A, it was the first guy kind of the market. B, the insurance companies weren't really overly impressed with the weight loss amounts that were happening and stuff like that. So it's very rare that a plan, well, not very rare, but rare-ish that a plan will cover Saxenda. It really depends on your employer and that sort of thing, but it's definitely more of the substantial plans and that sort of thing. Like I think the Alberta teachers, for example, they are technically run through Alberta Blue Cross, but I'm pretty sure they get coverage for Saxenda. So yeah, it really depends on your plan. When will Wegovy and Mounjaro come out? Wegovy in particular, I suspect there's going to be more coverage for it. And from what I kind of know of backdoor dealings and stuff like that, it's because somebody who makes the said drug is paying somebody else a lot of money to make it happen. So hopefully things will change in the future in terms of coverage and whatnot. But yeah, we're ultimately going to see. So it's pretty tough in that sense. And if your plan covers Saxenda, pretty straightforward if you meet the BMI criteria and cutoffs. But yeah, it's generally a lot easier if you have diabetes as a concurrent condition. Jenny of Coldstone, is Wegovy increasing to greater than 2.4 milligrams? I've heard a rumor in the rumor mill that you can increase, that it might increase for maintenance dose. As of right now, I don't know of anybody or any studies that go to a dose above 2.4 milligrams. I think really what would end up happening is you're getting diminishing returns after a certain point. Like it's just not going to provide any additional benefit or anything like that to go above the 2.4 milligrams. There comes a point where we're essentially saturating all of your receptors and there's just nothing else to bind to. So you're just injecting drug that goes in, doesn't bind, doesn't do anything, gets metabolized, broken down, and you pee or poop it out kind of thing. So at that point, you're just kind of wasting drug in a sense. So yeah, not that I know of. That obviously could change, but I haven't heard or seen anything about that kind of coming out at this point in time. I think what we're going to see is newer drugs, or there's certainly some agents in the pipeline right now that are combining Wegovy with another drug of some kind to kind of increase the effects of the latter. So getting kind of a synergistic effect, but not increasing one of the individual drugs themselves. So hope that helps. Holy crap, 27 new messages. Okay. Kathy, Ruin Y, gained back half of those lost. Thank you for responding. My pleasure. Leela Finn, took me a year to get to 1 milligram because of side effects, really severe. My A1C is excellent, less than 6. Awesome. Shauna, I take Contrave. I have tried the needle, but then it went away. But now on the contract, I guess. Not sure. Leela, no weight loss. If I increase to 2 milligrams, will that help with weight loss, and will I experience lows? So as long as, so will these drugs, if you increase the dose, first off, will it lead to weight loss? It might if you get into a calorie deficit. Again, these drugs are nothing special in terms of how they help with weight loss. We still need to get into a calorie deficit. So our calories going in must be less than our calories going out. If you increase the dose of the drug and it allows you to consume and eat less food, then maybe, and that leads to a calorie deficit, then yeah, the higher dose, you're probably going to lose weight. Will you experience lows? In general, the risk of lows and hypoglycemia, as long as you're not on any drugs that already push your blood sugars lower. So if you're on insulin or sulfonylurea or other drugs that are what we call kind of secretagogues or push more insulin out at various times and whatnot, in general, the mechanism for blood sugar management shuts off when your blood sugars are in the normal range. That's why we can use it in individuals that have, say, just obesity and don't have diabetes. So yeah, it really, yeah, the risk would be very, very, very low unless there's something else or you're on other medications and stuff. So Shauna, what weight should I be at to finally go for surgery? There's no specified weight. Generally, surgeries are based on BMI cutoffs. So if your BMI is greater than 40, so you have what's called class 3 obesity, then you qualify for surgery. Or if your BMI is greater than 35, but you have comorbid conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, some other kind of condition that is comorbid with the obesity or driven by the obesity and stuff like that. So always kind of something to, that would be kind of the cutoffs and criteria in that regard that would consider you a candidate, yay or nay for surgery. And then of course, meeting with the surgery and that sort of thing. Brianne Lee, does Accutane truly cause weight gain, and can I take Ozempic while on it? If so. So Accutane, I mean, it varies person to person. It's definitely a rarer side effect. Accutane more causes the issues of just drying everything out from your eyes to your skin to your mucosal layers and that sort of thing. Great at managing acne, but just dries the crap out of everything. Most people generally don't gain weight on it. It's not really too much of a concern. Pretty rare in that sense. But yeah, if there's no other contraindications or anything, there's no interaction between the two that I'm aware of. So in theory, yes, you could. DC, is breakfast necessary? So nothing is necessary. I mean, you can do ultimately whatever you'd like and whatever ultimately works for you. The people who I find that are the most successful, not only managing their weight, but improving their health, building muscle, building strength, all those wonderful things, tend to eat breakfast. They're really, the evidence has kind of gone back and forth whether breakfast is beneficial for weight loss or not. Again, it doesn't really seem to matter from the weight loss perspective because it more or less just matters about how many calories you're consuming in the day. What we do have from the studies where people ate breakfast versus didn't is that the people that ate breakfast, had a reduction in appetite later in the day and felt more in control of their cravings and stuff. So maybe if we were to do another study and look at kind of the rigor and controls, would we maybe see a benefit in terms of weight loss? Maybe, but again, it depends on you being in a calorie deficit for you to ultimately lose weight. So if you can skip breakfast and be in a calorie deficit consistently and do that lifelong, awesome, fantastic, then it's going to work for you. But for most people, especially if you're binging later in the night or later in the day, or your hunger increases in the day or what have you, I definitely recommend getting breakfast and front loading as much protein and calories as you can earliest in the day, and helping to curb those cravings and get that fuel into your system. Now, the other aspect that's coming out and is very interesting in terms of what we call chrononutrition. So that's looking at kind of the timing of meals, what you're having with your meals, and a whole bunch of other stuff is kind of all encompassing in that. Well, what we're finding is that when we first wake up in the morning, our bodies are essentially primed and ready to manage and take in food. So we're better able to handle sugars, we're better able to handle fats and all the other nutrients that come into our bodies earlier in the day. As the day goes on, those systems become less effective at managing, sugar amounts, fat amounts, and that sort of thing that are equal to what they had earlier in the day. And that's just because the body's basically getting ready to shut down and get ready for bed and stuff. And so kind of afternoon onwards, we just show higher spikes in blood sugar, higher spikes in our cholesterol levels and that sort of thing. And so, so there is some recommendations that are maybe starting to come out that we should have more of our food earlier in the day. Again, the data is very preliminary at this point in time. But if you're having, skipping breakfast and eating later in the day when your body is less effective at processing nutrients, and that causes spikes in blood sugar and spikes in cholesterol and stuff, that might ultimately lead to potential long-term risk from like heart attack perspective and that sort of thing. So definitely all things to look at. But yeah, it's not necessary, but that's kind of some of the rundown of things that I talked about and why I often suggest it. What are your thoughts on compounding? I answered it earlier, so if you want my full detailed answer, you can check out my live, which will be posted on my YouTube channel at the official Dr. Dan. But basically, yeah, I just recommend staying away from compounding. Too many risks, don't know what's on it and that sort of thing, so I avoid. A teaspoon of baking soda in a cup of warm water will cure your sulfur burps. It's not a terrible suggestion. I won't get back behind it or anything, but essentially using baking soda, which is more basic, to neutralize an acid, that's going to kind of help with your acid reflux and that sort of thing. So yes, in theory, it will work. However, always keep in mind that there are potential risks with taking and drinking baking soda, as it is more basic, can burn the throats and tubes and all kinds of things like that. So, yeah. Melina, I'm always watching your YouTube. Only today I get to watch you live. Awesome. Love it. Thanks for joining. Is there a lot of side effects on 0.5 of Ozempic? Really, it all depends on person to person. Some people get side effects at 0.25, some people don't get side effects till 1. So it's impossible to say. Yeah, it just varies person to person. Maggie Rose, thanks for answering. Best wishes from Scotland. What's going on, Scotland? JH, what drug are we talking about? We are specifically talking about the GLP-1 receptor agonist. Melina, first to second week of taking Saxenda, I don't experience any loss in appetite. When I'm on 2.4 milligrams only, I feel the side effect and loss of appetite. So it varies person to person, again, when you kind of get the kicking in of the effect of it and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, higher doses for some people, lower doses for others. It really varies person to person sometimes. Brooke on YouTube, my doctor won't prescribe until I talk to a dietitian in YYC, and then only if the dietitian thought it would benefit. Any talking points for doctor? I've tried on my own many times to lose weight, to lose without success. I don't know why your doctor would want you to, I guess what the doctor is probably wanting is to say that you've optimized your dietary patterns and all that sort of thing. I mean, dietitians, they have a very, very great skill set in that regard of things. And I've worked with some that are certainly qualified to kind of make that call or not. However, in general, it's, yeah, kind of having more of the understanding of how the body works and the physiology and the lab work and stuff like that is definitely some things that you would, your clinician, your family doctor should be looking at to properly prescribe that medication. Because even if your dietary patterns are fully optimized, you might still be struggling with your weight and whatnot like that. So that's a really tough one. The biggest things that I would look at, though, is just kind of bringing things to show to your doctor that, you've optimized your diet. So you're getting X amount of protein in, you're working on this amount of activity or what have you, and just showing the doc all these various things. And then, I mean, finding a dietitian, showing the dietitian all these various things and that you're struggling with your weight. There's a lot of, you'll have to kind of find a dietitian that isn't part of, I would say, the Hayes group, just because the Hayes group tends to avoid anything weight loss or weight loss related, and in particular the medications they don't particularly recommend in any kind of way. So kind of just going through the steps to kind of work on that respective things, and seeing a dietitian would certainly be beneficial, and just making sure that you are getting appropriate amount of nutrients and that sort of thing in, to help with the overall process of managing your health. So hope that helps. Do you think the government will ever cover these under OHIP for obesity? Hopefully. I think it's coming. When that's going to be, I have to say. So yeah, but hopefully. Karen, hello from England. I was so ill on Saxenda. Will Wegovy be better for me? Probably not. You're probably going to have more side effects on Wegovy. Yeah, some people just aren't able to tolerate these medications. However, in saying that, I've seen some people that didn't tolerate Saxenda and they did okay on Ozempic, whether it was because they just had less side effects or maybe more resolve at that point in time to kind of get through the side effects or whatever. But most people who had some side effects on Saxenda are pretty much guaranteed to get side effects on Wegovy and Ozempic. JH, there's a lot of talk about different drugs. I came in late. What is it we are saying are good? JH, thanks, Liz. Fiona, I am here from Scotland. Awesome. DANs never worked for me. Saxenda never worked for me. Maybe nauseous even with small sugar intake. Cutting in and out. Is it okay to use, so is it okay to use Zofran with Ozempic? Technically it is. I mean, you certainly can use it with Ozempic. There'd be no questions or no issues and reactions or anything like that that I'm aware of. And certainly we will use it sometimes to help manage the nausea that comes with Ozempic. But of course, following up with your family doctor, clinician, and that sort of thing, just to make sure that you are getting the appropriate care and there's no issues, no interactions, and that sort of thing. So Janelle on YouTube, are there any other diagnoses that will get Ozempic covered by insurance other than diabetes? I've heard of insulin resistance and maybe metabolic syndrome getting it covered. So insulin resistance, basically what's going to get it covered if you have insulin resistance is that you essentially have blood sugars that are high enough that you now have a diagnosis of diabetes or pre-diabetes. So essentially that's what's occurring on the insulin resistance side of things. Same thing with metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is made up of a whole component of different things, everything from our weight to our blood pressure to our lipid levels and to our blood sugar levels. So if you have metabolic syndrome and your blood sugar levels are elevated as part of that aspect of things, then yeah, you could probably get coverage for it. But yeah, short of that, there's going to be the blood sugar component that's going to ultimately drive whether you get it covered at this point in time. Will that change in the future as other indications and things come out? Maybe, but as of right now, yeah, that would be kind of the main sticking criteria. Hopefully it's working now, maybe. Yeah, maybe my sound was cutting out. Sorry about that, guys. I have no idea why. Roux-en-Y, so JH had a Roux-en-Y surgery 13 years ago, started at 314, down to 180, gained back gradually, now back at 238. Help, where to start? So, I mean, there's a lot to kind of look at and kind of piece together in a situation like this, obviously requiring an assessment front to back to kind of see what are the changes, where's your life currently at. First and foremost, the things we'd be looking at are just, what are your current dietary patterns? So what are you eating? What are you consuming? Are you getting enough protein, eating consistently through the day, that sort of thing? Have we added in, weightlifting, weight training, and that sort of thing to help build and strengthen muscles and start to help increase metabolic rate and that sort of thing? So looking at all those things, and then also looking at the psychological, emotional aspects of weight and weight loss and stuff like that. And that's all very, very complex. And some people have pretty severe trauma. Other people, have various issues around their relationship with food and that sort of thing. So there's a lot to kind of unpack and look at. Obviously following up with your doctor and care team, and maybe even medications would be an option as well. So be nice. In your opinion, do you feel it's going to be harder to lose weight being on gabapentin and Ozempic? Good question. Not so much. Well, I mean, it depends on how you're responding to the gabapentin, what dose of the gabapentin that you're on, and that sort of thing. So gabapentin, we don't know exactly how it can affect our ability to manage our weight. What is kind of some of the ideas is that gabapentin has quite a bit of cognitive effects. So it can basically make you feel dopey, make you feel like you're in a fog and that sort of thing. And so that's going to ultimately affect your cognitive capacity in order to choose or to say, hey, I should pack my lunch before I go to bed so I have it ready in the morning. Or, let's have this for dinner versus, oh, I'm too tired to cook or what have you. And so let's just order in. So that component may be affected by it. It really depends on how much of an effect that it's having and that sort of thing. From what I've read previously, it doesn't seem like there's any, effects on how our body processes glucose, sugars, and that sort of thing. So it shouldn't be an issue in that regard of things. So it shouldn't limit, if you're in a calorie deficit, your ability to lose weight. But it certainly could affect just your ability to make the choices and get the more of the benefit that Ozempic would provide in allowing you to, make more mindful decisions and choices with your dietary patterns and your day-to-day and stuff like that. So that would be kind of the main aspects and things there. It certainly could make it more challenging, but Ozempic might even balance it out. It really depends on how it's overall affecting you and such. Brooke, thank you. I'll ask to avoid the Hayes group locally. I appreciate the advice. She was hesitant because other patients had issues. Thank you for all the info on your videos. My pleasure. It really depends on the clinician and stuff like that. I will be taking patients starting in April-ish at kind of a new gig that I have coming up here pretty quick. And I'm in the Calgary area. So, and even if you're not in the Calgary area, I am currently taking clients and stuff like that to help people with managing their weight. So if you need help from the lifestyle perspective and dietary patterns and that sort of thing, feel free to reach out. Links are in all my bios, or you can check out my website, healthevolve.co. O is in orange. And kind of get the updates on the comings and goings of what I'm up to. So, Jessica, are you able to work with people in Canada? So right now I do see people online and virtually, focusing entirely on the lifestyle aspect of things. And that's globally, if you will, right now. I don't prescribe any of the medications. I leave that to your primary care provider, whoever they are, just because on the global perspective, I can't order labs and follow that and properly mitigate and titrate and stuff. So we just look at the lifestyle aspects and kind of coaching through various things and whatnot. Again, links in my bio. You can check it out, book a discovery call with me, and we'll see if you're a good fit for the program or not. All right, Jenny of Coldstone, how do you know when you are in a weight loss stall, whether to take a break from dieting or go down in calories to ensure you're in a calorie deficit? So basically, yeah, when do you know you've plateaued, and when do you know you should take a break? I mean, the best practice is that you should take a dieting break every 12 to 16 weeks. The reason being is that most people, dieting and being in a calorie deficit is exhausting. And when you go beyond that point, what you're ultimately doing is you're just burning yourself out and making it more challenging to stay in a calorie deficit. And so 12 to 16 weeks is kind of the time that I usually recommend that you should be kind of taking a break, bring your calories up to your predicted calorie amounts, chill there for a few months, focus on health, exercise, and that beautiful thing, and then look at creating another calorie deficit. Other signs and symptoms would be, if you're finding, I would say, at least a month of no weight change, looking at, okay, is there any dietary changes that I can make? Have I been eating out more this month? How's my sleep? Have I optimized all the things that I can do? And do I feel burnt out? Do I feel tired of keeping track of what I'm eating and yada, 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 yada? Do I need a physical break to kind of just chill out for a little bit and eat some more food and focus more on health? So all kind of things to kind of look through and look for and such like that. But yeah, generally I recommend 12 to 16 weeks. And when you do it 12 to 16 weeks and kind of take a break and bring your calories up and stuff like that, you can take a shorter break versus if you've been dieting for years and years and years, like a lot of people that I work with, you generally need to take a break for like months and even upwards of a year before you can start looking at a calorie deficit again. So that's kind of just looking at resetting things like your metabolic rates, correcting metabolic adaptations, and giving yourself just that recharge and reset to look at potentially going back into it and stuff. So, Miss Lady, what advice would you give a person who is obese and is thinking about starting Ozempic? So if you're thinking about starting Ozempic, and that sort of thing, just understanding and realizing that, again, these drugs they're nothing special. They're very effective at what they do in helping to manage our weight and stuff like that. But you still need to be in a calorie deficit. So if you're not looking at how you can optimize your dietary patterns, getting enough protein, veggies, eating consistently, eating an appropriate amount of calories, not 1,200 calories a day and that sort of thing, kind of looking at all those aspects, and then also looking at how you've kind of built other lifestyle patterns and behaviors. So getting appropriate amounts of sleep, again, weightlifting, resistance training of some kind. I can't stress that enough. If there was only one kind of activity I could recommend for people, it would be to lift weight and build muscle. The plethora of benefits that come from that are unreal, especially for people who are trying to lose weight as well. I mean, cardiovascular activity is great and stuff. So you really need to look at all the other patterns and behaviors you have in your life and look at correcting and managing and mitigating all of those things while you're using, either before or while you're using the medication, because the medication will allow you to do that. The better structure, the better habits and that sort of thing that you get in place, the better you're going to be able to keep that weight off in the long term and the overall better health that you're going to have on a day-to-day basis. So that'd be kind of some of my general advice. Kathy, yes, I am in Calgary. User 174 something, still on 0.25 milligrams, week 7, trouble eating more than 1,000 a day, not losing much. Should I increase dose? There's a lot of things to potentially look at. It depends what those 1,000 calories are being comprised of. I can tell you it's not nearly enough calories just to kind of sustain life and stuff like that. So I would want to be looking at how can we further optimize that, and just focus on maybe some of the health behaviors and aspects and just helping you to get some of those things teed up. Certainly increasing the dose could be an option, but that's going to make it even harder to eat more food, which your body ultimately needs to properly mitigate and manage and do the day-to-day things that you need to do, like lifting weights and that sort of thing. So kind of just being mindful of those sorts of things that, we still need to be focusing on health, nutrition, and that respective thing. So Barbara L, what about severe constipation issues on Ozempic? How do you deal with that? So yeah, the other aspect is that since these drugs are slowing down how quickly food is going from your stomach to your small intestine, we certainly want to look at, well, it can certainly cause constipation, stuff like that. So the obviously big things that we want to first focus on is fluid, fiber intake. So, plenty of veggies. If you're not taking a fiber supplement, definitely adding that in. So something like a Metamucil I'm a big fan of, but Benefiber, what have you, all good options to add in and bump up your fiber intake, and drinking plenty of water with that will help to kind of keep things regular. If you're severely constipated, like right now, generally we want to step it up and look at things like either glycerin suppositories, Senecot, bisacoidal tablets, that sort of thing. Those things will help to stimulate and get things moving right now. Some GI side effects, cramping and stuff that can kind of come with those, but that can certainly get things moving in that respect. Of course, following up with your doctor. And then also looking at maybe if the fiber isn't good enough for kind of day-to-day use, adding in something like Restorelax. If your doctor says it's okay, you can take Restorelax long-term as long as you're properly monitored and managed by your care team and stuff. And certainly Restorelax can help to bring more fluid into your bowels and ultimately help to manage the day-to-day constipation. Short of that, then we're just looking at, the non-farm aspects. So again, the fiber thing, but also getting as much activity as you can in, walking, you can run, bike, whatever. That's all going to help with the movement of the poo through the system, if you will. So that's kind of some of my suggestions there. Be nice. Thank you for all your help, support, and advice. Much appreciated. And you look wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Julia, Dan, hi. Hello, Julia. Sarah N, is there a med that will help with binge eating? I just can't turn off the food noise in my brain. So yeah, the one medication that has the indication for binge eating disorder right now is Vyvanse. So it is a stimulant-based medication, can be quite effective. Wasn't a huge fan of the trials that they did with Vyvanse, considering a success versus not, but they did see a reduction in binge eating episodes. When it comes to binge eating disorder, I find there's kind of two types in that respective thing. So first off, there's type 1, which is purely driven by some kind of emotional trigger. Boss yells at you at work, get into a fight with your partner, kids are stressing you out, whatever. And ultimately it triggers a binge, which could happen at any time in the day. So yeah, it really kind of varies when it's going to happen, but it's more of an emotional response, and your self-soothing behavior to that emotional trigger is to then go and binge and eat, and it can happen anytime. Then there's type 2, which I find is more driven by the case that we've already kind of talked about, where people don't eat enough food earlier in the day. And then they get later in the day, they're done work, they're less distracted, they're relaxed, they're tired. So they don't have as much cognitive capacity to restrain and hold back and make more mindful choices. And because they haven't eaten anything earlier in the day, biology then ramps up and kicks in and ultimately causes a binge later in the evening. So that's more of a being driven by a biological hunger process and that sort of thing. And ultimately, depending on how much you binge, what could happen is that you eat so much food, you wake up the next morning, you're not hungry, so you skip breakfast, maybe skip lunch, and then the cycle then just repeats itself. In both type 1 and type 2, one of the first steps that we look at from a dietary perspective is just kind of correcting dietary patterns. So eating more consistently through the day, getting enough calories, getting enough protein, and that can have a big effect in managing it. And then certainly adding something like Vyvanse certainly can play a role in that respective things as well. The unfortunate thing from the dietary perspective is that, it's not just like correctly eating for one day. It's like we've got to do it for a month or two of consistently eating throughout the day, eating more calories earlier in the day to help and ultimately see the effects and stuff like that. And then of course, we're looking at, on the emotional side of things, what are the emotional triggers? Why do the emotional triggers come about? Kind of looking back at the links in the chain as to when did this first evolve? When did it first come about? Is there some kind of trauma in your past and that sort of thing? And so that's something to kind of look at with a psychologist counselor or what have you. So yeah, those things can all certainly help. And then for some people, yeah, the GLP-1 receptor agonist can sometimes help in just calming down the food noise aspect. And there's also SSRIs, so Prozac, fluoxetine, and those sorts of things also have pretty good evidence for helping to manage binge eating disorder as well. So lots of different options and stuff. Janny, I set small goals. It's not as overwhelming. Boom, you nailed it, Janny. That is the key. Sheila, is it okay to take Ozempic with low blood pressure? I mean, technically, yes, but follow up with your doctor and make sure, yeah, make sure it's all good and no problems there. Miss Lady, thank you very much. I need to educate myself for sure and set myself up for success. Awesome, glad to hear it. And yeah, the better you can kind of set yourself up and get a plan for the good patterns and behaviors versus just kind of jumping on the drug and hoping for the best, the more successful you're going to be. You fail to plan, you plan to fail. Sarah B, hi Dan, just popped in. What's up, Sarah? Jenny, probiotics, yogurt, Metamucil. I am assuming for the constipation, which all certainly can help, and drinking a bunch of water. Yippers. MD 2222. I need help. Do you recommend Ozempic? I mean, it's impossible for me to kind of make a recommendation just to people via the tickety talk and stuff like that. It's a good drug. It might work. Talk with your doctor. Jenny, magnesium, that certainly can help. Sheila, is there any long-term issues taking Ozempic? So with Ozempic and the other GLP-1 receptor agonists, we have 20 plus years of working with these medications. At this point in time, there doesn't seem to be any long-term issues. People will talk about the thyroid cancer, which I'll talk about in more detail next week, and things like pancreatitis and whatnot. But yeah, overall, the risk is like none to very, very infinitesimally small. And yeah, overall, very safe medications. So I battled obesity my entire life. I really am struggling to lose weight and keep it off. Definitely chat with the doctor. Jody, for me, it's severe nerve pain or can't sleep. That can definitely make it challenging for sure. Sarah, I'm on Wellbutrin right now, and my nurse prac just upped the dose from 150 to 300. How effective is Wellbutrin for weight loss? So we haven't really got a chance to talk about Contrave here tonight. I'll have to save that for another live in particular. But yeah, Contrave, Wellbutrin or bupropion or Zyban is the other name for it, is a component of Contrave. And so Contrave has the extra component of naltrexone. So together naltrexone, Contrave lead to anywhere from a 5 to maybe 10% weight loss. Generally, it's more than that 5 to 8% weight loss on average, depending on which study you look at. Wellbutrin alone, again, it depends on the person and that sort of thing. I've seen people lose a ton of weight on it. However, we were likely treating some kind of underlying depression, anxiety, and that sort of thing. And that concurrently allowed them to essentially make the changes and be more mindful about their day-to-day choices and stuff like that. So it could be great, depending on what kind of the other underlying aspects that are there. If you follow Liz, she's been kind of moderating things for me. She's kind of documenting her journey with Contrave and stuff like that. So you can definitely check her out and get more insight on how she's doing. But I would say 5% would be kind of the average weight loss, maybe less with just Wellbutrin alone. And yeah, again, that varies person to person and that sort of thing. So hope that helps. Emmy Greenlaw, I've gained 50 pounds since going gluten-free after celiac diagnosis. Okay, that's super, super challenging and tough. I mean, the big thing that I would be looking at is just, yeah, confirming what your protein intake and stuff like that is, talking with your doctor. Again, medications might be an option for you, but a lot of things to kind of look at and to take into account. For Jody, I've been on quetiapine for sleep and we're now weaning me off because of the binge eating. Yeah, quetiapine and the antipsychotics in general can be challenging. I mean, they can be very effective at what they're mitigating and managing, but they certainly have a proponent of increasing cravings for carbohydrates. They might have some effects at the level of our fat cells in that they basically kind of help build up fat in the fat cells, essentially. So yeah, they're can be a good drug. They can help with sleep, but yeah, they certainly can cause some other issues on the other side and make managing your weight super challenging. So Sarah B, I've gained over 100 pounds since I had my son. I asked for semaglutide, but they prescribed me Wellbutrin. That's an interesting choice. I mean, you could ask for like the naltrexone component and get that one separately, and then you have essentially Contrave in some respects. So yeah, it's man, it's tough. Yeah, I don't know why they would have done the other one, but yeah, I would kind of just keep talking and keep following up and see what you can do and how well it works for you, and then just kind of work on making the small changes on top of it all too. Shelly, how much protein do you recommend per day to lose weight? That's a great question. So I have a fancy dandy calculator on my website. If you go healthevolve.co, .co, O is in orange, / TDEE - calculator. I think it's backwards dash again. The calculator will come up, or if you just go to the main page of my website, healthevolve.co, you'll be able to go there. And I believe at the top of the page and then at the bottom of the page, there is a link, and it should come up as like kind of a pop-up on the screen as well. And you can go there and type in how to lose weight, optimum weight, or what have you. You answer the questions. It'll tell you the minimum amount of protein you should be aiming for, as well as what your calorie intake should be for either maintaining your weight, which is the optimal health, losing weight, or even gaining weight if you want to bulk and have muscle and stuff like that. So that'll give you a pretty good idea. As a general rule of thumb for something that's super easy, if you wanted to say, look at, some people will recommend taking your goal weight. So if you're 300 pounds right now and you want to get to 200 pounds and 200 pounds is your goal weight, take that 200 pounds times by 1, and that's how many grams of protein you should be eating in a day. So aiming for about 200 grams of protein. Probably a little bit on the high side for some individuals and stuff like that, but it at least gives you a target to kind of aim for. Basically, the more protein you can get in, the better. There is a plethora of benefits, especially if you start adding in weight training and that sort of thing. Protein. But to get a bit more of a more accurate measure, definitely check out my website. And yeah, that's kind of what I would recommend there. So yeah, more protein, the better. Heather, can you buy Mounjaro and not use your insurance, even if not diabetic? Like I paid $1,000 a month. Yeah, so you can technically, you can buy, if you have a prescription for it from your doctor, even if it's for like off-label and just for weight loss, you can technically get prescribed like Mounjaro if you don't have diabetes, or Ozempic if you don't have diabetes, and use it what's called off-label. There's nothing wrong with that. We do it all the time, especially with older drugs and stuff like that. Like Wellbutrin, for example, we use Wellbutrin everything for smoking cessation to depression to anxiety, for energy, ADHD, the list goes on and on. A whole bunch of non or off-label uses. So it just hasn't got the indication from Health Canada or whatever. So certainly that could be the case. Insurance companies are the ones that are kind of the real sticklers. And so insurance companies will generally only provide coverage for a medication that is being used for and give an indication. So for Ozempic, they're only going to provide coverage for it if you have diabetes, because that's what Ozempic is indicated for. Saxenda, if your insurance company covers it, they will provide coverage for Saxenda if you meet the BMI criteria for having obesity. But if you wanted to pay out of pocket and your doctor was willing to prescribe it for you, yeah, you certainly could get Mounjaro and not have diabetes. It'll have the indication for obesity pretty quick here, and then it will hopefully be able to be run through insurance at that point. But yeah, in theory, you definitely could, and certainly I prescribe patients Ozempic off-label for just purely weight management, and they pay it out of pocket for it because their insurance company won't cover it. So same thing with Saxenda. So definitely possible. Might have a little bit more trouble with the drug shortages and stuff like that are going on, but yeah, no problems, no worries. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, yeah, dun, take another medication another way. Sarah, and I'm a nursing student. I have a ton of knowledge, but using it on myself is the kicker. We are all the absolute worst patients and the most terrible ones to kind of try and look inwards. I recommend having some kind of third party that can kind of take a look at the bigger picture of everything that you've got going on. Because while we can reflect and think and whatever and process through things, we sometimes don't see all the dots and stuff, or maybe we're scared of confronting those said dots. And so yeah, having someone to support you from the outside looking in, always beneficial, and can kind of provide a different perspective and stuff like that, and give you the advice that you ultimately need sometimes. So I get it. Jenny, what do you think about keto and macros? Keto, I made a video on this earlier. I mean, if you want to cut the joy that is carbohydrates out of your life, and you feel like you can honestly do that for the rest of your life, more power to you. I have done keto way back when previously, on like when I very disordered eating patterns, stuff like that, and wanted to lose weight. It definitely worsened my disordered eating patterns and that sort of thing back in the day. And it was effing horrible. Hated every minute of it. I also did keto again recently for like a period of more or less 1 week where I was like extreme keto, but I was prepping for a bodybuilding show. And the last couple of weeks I was keto, cut out the last of my carbs, basically just to drop all water, as much weight as we possibly could, and that sort of thing. Again, miserable. My workouts were awful. My weights decreased dramatically. I was cold all the time. That was partly because I had lost so much weight and stuff and was in such a calorie deficit. But yeah, overall, if you're looking at performance and lifting weights and that sort of thing, and improving your health, I definitely don't recommend keto. And also you need to think about the saturated fat content of that said keto as well. So red meat, butters and stuff like that will definitely lead to you dying an early death. But if you do it kind of, eating more fish, Mediterranean style, yeah, it can be very, very healthy in that respect of things. But you got to be able to do it long term. If you're looking from a purely weight loss perspective, keto is nothing really special or anything like that. You lose just as much weight as you do in a calorie deficit. And the keto is just a tool to kind of achieve that. So no special benefits that ultimately come with it. So really depends on you and what ultimately works for you. Macros. I mean, macros are the foundation of calories and nutrients and food and that sort of thing. I always recommend high protein, moderate amount of carbs, and moderate amount of fat. Generally, actually, most people that I work with, what I recommend is focus on the protein, get your protein in, and then fill in the rest of your calories with carbs and fats and whatever else it's going to be. So yeah, that's kind of my general take on that. I follow very much more from my dietary patterns, more specific, but I also have different training goals in the sense that trying to add muscle weight and do body recomposition and potentially compete in another bodybuilding show down the road. So my macros are very dialed in, and I eat kind of the same thing every day and a crap ton of food every single day. So yeah, depends on what you're trying to go for and such. Shelly, perfect. Thank you. Definitely check it out. Absolutely. Jody, amazing how I beat myself up over 250 versus 225. That 25-pound weight gain destroys my self-esteem. Yeah, it's really shit that how much power we give to the scale and everything like that. And you know, if we just would let all of that go, and just focused on just health and stuff like that, we would ultimately be a hell of a lot healthier and a much better place on all fronts, and probably would actually lose weight more easily and be a lot more manageable long term. What are your thoughts about intermittent fasting, like 36, 42, 72 hours? Again, intermittent fasting is kind of like keto. If you want to skip a bunch of meals and call it intermittent fasting, go for it. I generally see more people that develop disordered eating patterns because of it. And most people that I work with, I get them becoming more active and lifting weights, and intermittent fasting does not help with any of that whatsoever. Again, it can be a tool to help you get in a calorie deficit, but unless you can do that for the rest of your life, it's not going to be successful in maintaining it. So I generally don't recommend it. There's no special benefits that come with intermittent fasting in any form or fashion. So yeah, that would be kind of my recommendation. Just focus on protein, good quality whole foods and that sort of thing. Eat more consistently through the day, eat enough calories, take diet breaks. Those are going to be all the things that are going to help you to be consistent, and consistency is all that matters. Awesome, Sarah. Glad to hear you have a mental health professional with you. Lisa, any insight as to why so many of us on Ozempic get cold a lot, even before significant weight loss? Yeah, the reason why people are getting cold on these medications is because they're not eating enough food. You don't have enough calories going in the tank to be burned. Your body is fundamentally going to start reducing your internal body temperature, because you're just wants to shut down and withhold and hang on to as much fat and calories as it possibly can. So yeah, so that would be the big reason. And my phone's going to die here. So last two questions. Yeah, if you, oh, there we go. All right, that one's gone. We'll jump over here real quick for the final bit here. But Loretta, hey, I've been on 1 milligram of Ozempic for a month and didn't lose 1 pound. My doctor put me on 2 milligram per day. Is there any specific reason why I haven't weight loss? It's because you have not been in a calorie deficit. Get yourself in a calorie deficit and you'll lose weight. So that's the biggest thing and biggest aspect to all of this. If you're not in a calorie deficit, if your calories going in are greater than your calories going out, or if they're equal, you're not going to lose weight. And if they're greater than your calories that are going out, you're going to gain weight. So fundamentally, yeah, you need to look at your dietary patterns and that sort of thing, and see what's going on there. So anyways, you beautiful people, I think that's where we'll wrap it up for tonight, considering my phone died. So yeah, thanks for joining in, everybody. And we will talk to you beautiful people later.